How's everybody doing this morning? Very well. Good. Thank you. All right, you all look beautiful today. Thanks for joining me this morning. I know it's early. You can join in on the conversation today by using the hashtags, as you heard earlier, CM Seattle or Black Future. For the past year, I've been really intrigued with the design thinking process. It's an iterative way to solve problems and to think critically about problems big or small. The process combines divergent thinking with out-of-the-box ideas and rational analysis of prototypes and also empathy to gain context of the problems that you're solving. I love the empathy part of the process because it really gives you real insight to the people that you're designing for. Last quarter at the University of Washington, I took a class called User-Centered Design, and we explored this empathy part of the process by learning things like affinity diagramming and still photo surveys and contextual interviews. We used those for projects and on websites and group projects. But I really got a chance to get my hands dirty with this, literally, last year at Taft Academy where I work. We worked on a design thinking process where we had a very simple design question, and it was, how might we create a campus where we can make and grow stuff? The students, along with their teacher, Kate, brainstormed ways of how to do this, and they came up with the Edible Campus project. It consists of an edible tool shed made of wood pallets and a straw bale garden formed in a simple pie. They grew toppings for pizza, like basil, and also strawberries for strawberry pie. It was so much fun to watch them get into the project and brainstorm and build prototypes. But the most inspiring moment for me was when the students really took ownership of the empathy phase. They actually went out and conducted interviews with teachers and students to get an understanding of how the campus works. They even did a Google Hangout with architects and interviewed master gardeners. They even took a field trip to the Bullitt Center, which is the world's greenest commercial building, located right here in Seattle. I was very pleased, though, when I found out on the weekends they actually went on their own to the local Home Depot and interviewed the managers there just to kind of ask them, what type of materials do you guys sell to builders? So it was really fun to see them take on that project. Last April, I had the privilege of helping 8 high school students at Taft Academy lead a design thinking workshop with elementary and middle school students in Kyoto, Japan. The students took an imaginary journey where they had to go and fetch water. So they went under a cave, through the swamps, walked for miles and miles to find this water. Oh, they found the water. It's pretty heavy, they have to team up. A few more miles to go. Don't forget to go under the cave.
Give me some more. 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 Give me some more.
It's tiring.
Give me some more.
Don't let it slip there. Oh, there you go. thing to have partners. Almost there.
Cha-ching.
The students learned that people, even as young as them, have to walk up to 4 miles a day just to find a water source. In fact, over 1 billion people in the world have to do this every day. After their imaginary journey, the students actually brainstorm new ideas and ways to make water filters so that people might not have to walk so far to get their water. They used materials that they found around their school to create their prototypes, and it worked out pretty successfully. These projects were different than other things and assignments they might have done in the past. The students got to explore and discover the connection to people and to the people that they were designing for. It turns out we're all born with this type of connection. Scientists have discovered through MRI technology what they call mirror neurons. These mirror neurons are soft wiring in our brain that shows the same activity in our brain when we see an emotional response or feeling in another person. Now, I want to warn you, the next slide is pretty graphic, and I apologize in advance to anybody upset. But I really want to see if these mirror neurons work. Ooh. You just feel the pain on that guy's face, right? It's that moment when things don't work out as planned. Yeah. All right, we're all over it? Okay. Yeah. The economist and author Jeremy Rifkin says, empathy is the opposite of utopia. Empathy is grounded in the acknowledgement of death and the celebration of life, and rooting for each other to flourish and be. It's based on our frailties and our imperfections. So when we talk about building an empathic civilization, we're not talking about utopia. We're talking about the ability for human beings to show solidarity, not only with each other, but our fellow creatures who have a one and only life on this planet. Homo empathicus. How might we stand in solidarity to solve together some of our world's most wicked problems? Wicked problems are problems that are uncertain, complex, and messy. Climate change is an example of a wicked problem. But first, let's explore what that term really means. Webster's dictionary states that climate is the prevailing influence or environmental conditions characterizing a group or period. So we can see climate doesn't just pertain to temperature, but prevailing attitudes as well. So let's take a temperature check on a few of the wicked problems related to climate. A few weeks ago, President Obama gave the State of the Union address. And he stated that 2014 was the planet's warmest year on record. 14 of the 15 warmest years on record have fallen in the first 15 years of this century. A report from the World Bank says that the world will likely be 4 degrees warmer within the next century. 4 degrees spells out increased risk to food insecurity in America, but most importantly, African and Southeast Asian countries. And this is due to droughts, flooding, and shifts in rainfall. At the UN Climate Summit in 2009, a document leaked that showed that governments were targeting to cap global temperature rise at 2 degrees Celsius. This target was set by wealthy, industrialized nations that were most to blame for the carbon emissions, but that affected the most vulnerable populations on this earth. Delegates from African countries protested by chanting, 2 degrees is suicide. No to climate colonialism, no to climate genocide. Other protesters held a die-in. If we were to take a temperature check in America, we see similar protests over the disproportionate effects of white supremacy on Black lives. Across the country, die-ins are happening in Washington, D.C., at the Capitol, at brunches, and also in shopping malls across America. But that's happening to shake up the status quo and to keep within our collective consciousness the seemingly regular and almost legal assassinations of unarmed Black people. Every now and then, you can count on Kanye West to give us a temperature check on the prevailing climate in the world, right? Every now and then. In 2005, he said about Hurricane Katrina that George Bush doesn't care about Black people. Institutional discrimination affected the resilience and the recovery of African American communities in New Orleans and the Mississippi coast. Over 1,800 people died and over 1 million people were displaced right here in America. In my hometown of Detroit, asthma deaths are 5 times greater than the Michigan average due to the fact that oil refineries, trash incinerators, and toxin-producing facilities are in close proximity to the neighborhoods where people live. UN officials speaking on Detroit's water shutoff crisis said, disconnection of water services because of failure to pay due to lack of means constitutes to a violation of human rights of water and other international human rights. As water becomes more scarce due to climate change and continues to be treated as a commodity instead of a public right, marginalized communities are most at risk. But can empathy be a part of the solution for this wicked problem? Octavia Butler's fictional novel, Parable of the Sower, is set in a not too distant future where water costs several times more than gas. The main character, Lauren Olamina, has a psychological disorder called hyperempathy. She's a young, relatively middle-class Black woman, and her disorder causes her to feel another's good feelings or bad emotions to the extreme. Lauren's extreme sensitivity to the pervasive climate of pain and suffering forced her to question the dominant ideologies that caused some of the post-apocalyptic realities that were around her. I won't spoil the end of the book, definitely go out and read it. But her vision was to continue humanity amongst the stars. This was very high hopes for someone in the climate that she was in. She was an Afrofuturist. I think it's important to think about the future. So what will the black future look like? This is a film by the Kenyan director Wanura Koli called Pumzi. Let's take a look.
Take your dreams personal. I found the perfect soil sample and planted the mighty seed. It's growing.
Soil sample.
The one you sent. The box with no delivery note.
I didn't send anything. Reported to security and move on.
This could mean there's life on the outside.
You are not qualified to determine that. Forward your work to the science lab.
I'd like to apply for an exit visa to go outside. If I could find the original soil, I could...
The outside is dead.
But the soil is alive.
Take your dreams pieces.
But I know it's alive. It has to.
You were compromised by your illness. You should have taken your medication.
I have been taking them.
I can't help you anymore.
What about the plan?
Definitely check out that film when you get a chance. It's pretty inspiring. But there have been other Afrofuturists throughout time. The ahead of his time, out of this world musician Sun Ra said that space is the place, just like Octavia Butler did. But I really want to think about that question. What does Black future look like? Some might say this is Black History Month. I like to think of it as Black Future Month. One thing that we can all do is encourage policymakers to disrupt the status quo. Salute to Washington State's Governor Jay Inslee. This past Tuesday, House Bill 1314 passed, and it's a market-based greenhouse gas emissions program implemented by the Department of Ecology. The program will limit statewide emission levels of facilities, fuel suppliers, and electricity importers whose annual greenhouse gas emissions exceed 25,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. In addition to creating allowances for education and low-income housing, the Department of Ecology will also create a citizen committee that will investigate and identify communities of color that are potentially subject to disproportionate effects of climate change. So this is a great bill and a great thing that's happened. And I think there's more that we can do, and we can encourage our policymakers to make those changes. So on your name tags, there's a statement that says, "I just woke up after 100 years and." So you might have written something on your name tag before you came in, but now after hearing this information, I wonder if you could talk with the folks around you about maybe has that statement changed, or any other insights that you might have on either the next 100 years, or maybe you've been asleep for 100 years and you just woke up. So again, my name is David Harris, and I work at TAF. I'm a graduate student at University of Washington's Human Centered Design and Engineering Master's Program, and I'm a cultural entrepreneur at Hack the CD. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight, or this morning. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Yeah. Yes, Technology Access Foundation has been around for almost 20 years, and we're located in White Center. It's where our office is. We serve over 900 students. Our mission is to create opportunities for non-dominant youth, students of color, to excel in STEM education. And through the power of STEM education, have access to college and careers.
Can you define STEM for those that may not know?
Yes, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. In addition to our office in White Center, we also have the only public-private partnership school in the state called Taft Academy, and it's located in Kent, and it's part of the Federal Way School District. And we actually have a luncheon coming up on March 18th, so definitely check that out if you're interested in learning more about Taft. You, then, and then you.
I was interested to hear about a project that you're currently working on that you're really excited about.
Yeah, one of my most exciting projects for me personally, Hack the CD does monthly design charrettes. So far, we've been having them at Lake Chad Cafe. And we've been using this design thinking process to really create a space in the community that nurtures creativity. So Lake Chad Cafe is located in the Central District of Seattle, where I live. And part of the empathy process, we got a chance to talk to the owner, Felix. And Felix told us why he opened up Lake Chad Cafe. Well, number one, the Starbucks on 23rd and Jackson had a contract to display the history of the area of the Central District. So when you go there, you see on the top a jazz note. And for a long time, they had pictures of the jazz clubs that had been along Jackson Street. Jackson Street in the Central District has a long history of jazz and rock and roll and hip hop, but specifically jazz. Quincy Jones, Ray Charles used to play there. So in this Starbucks, their dedication to that. But that contract ran up earlier this year, and they took those pictures down. And it really felt like a loss in the community. We had other places in the community like Hemo, and Felix created Lake Chad with the idea that he can create a space where this community can still see these artifacts and be around each other. So after telling the story, he also said that he's actually from Chad, and Lake Chad is one of the largest bodies of water in Africa, and it's shrunken significantly due to climate change. So knowing this, we had a group of people and still have a group of people that continue to come and start to design the space, not just for Felix, but for the community. And that's been a cool project that I've been a part of. So long answer to your question.
Dave, not to interject, but I talked to Felix the other day. He's looking for a morning barista. So,
Okay.
So anybody who can do
Baristas at Lake Chad Cafe.
and a bartender? So there you go.
All right, Miguel.
Could you explain a little more about Hack the CD and the future of Hack the CD?
Yeah, Hack the CD started not even a year ago, about a half a year ago. And it's basically a collective of social innovators who are working to create fertile ground for the African American community to take part in the tech boom that's happening in Seattle. So we help to build the technology and entrepreneurial capacities of the community, specifically in the Central District. We started off by having a youth coding boot camp in August of last year. We had over 35 African American students create their own video games and learn how to program. And at the end of September, we held a hackathon with over 150 people, young and old, from 13 all the way to 70. And it was sponsored by Startup Weekend. And it starts on a Friday night. If you're not familiar with a hackathon, it starts on a Friday night where people pitch ideas. Anybody can pitch ideas and form teams. And throughout the weekend, you work on those ideas and actually create a prototype. So we actually launched 10 new businesses in the Central District during that weekend. The question here is,
How can designers get involved in Hack the CD?
well, if you check out our website, it's hackthecd.org, and then our Facebook page, and kind of follow our Twitter. We always have events going on. especially our design charrettes. We're always looking for designers to come through. And even at hackathons, we really try to stack the deck with developers as well as designers because we know how important the design process is. So we'd love to have you at our future events. Yep.
Could you share some of maybe your vision for Black Future in Seattle?
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, in March, there's a Black Future 2035 event that's happening. And it's an opportunity for African American community to, and the African diaspora in Seattle, to think about what does Seattle look like from the year 2020 to the year 2035. And it turns out Seattle actually has a plan called Seattle 2035. But when you look at that plan, it doesn't really reflect some of the communities that are part of Seattle. So it's an opportunity for people to start thinking for themselves, not just about what's going on right now, but also how can we thrive in the future. For me personally, I see the Central District as an innovation hub. We have an innovation district in South Lake Union. We created 10 new tech companies last September in the Central District, so I don't see why we can't be an innovation district as well. Capitol Hill just created a cultural arts district. I think there's lots of cultural arts in the Central District. So I really see the Central District being probably a combination of culture and innovation, and you might be able to call it a cultural innovation district. So that's what I think the future is for locally. And in general, I think Black Future is the vanguard. There's been recent Nielsen reportings that state, I think the number's like 67% of whites and Latinos agree that blacks lead popular culture. So we get a lot of popular culture from our history and the things that are going on. And I think it's going to be great as we see in the future as we start to own that and become more creators and consumers. And as the barriers of entry to tools and resources start to come down, we'll start to have more access to actually create the things that we want to see and have that reflected in the popular culture that we see. Any other questions?
I really like the fact that you talked about climate, and I'm also a climate. So I was thinking, if a TAC or Washington, are you guys have any kind of present project or future project based on climate or
Yeah, well, our students work through projects, so it's a project-based learning school. And we actually, in addition to the teachers collaborating to create projects where students learn their content, their math and humanities content through projects, the students actually get a chance to create their own independent projects. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had a STEM Expo where over 300 students and 100 different projects, independent projects, were presented by our students in 6th through 12th grade. And a lot of the projects had to do with climate and environment. So I was really pleased to see that. In the video where we watched the students carrying the water, those students actually got the idea for their design thinking project in Japan from a project that they led called the solar powered water filter. So these are just a couple of the projects that the students are doing themselves, and they get it. They understand that the future is up to them, and they're taking ownership of that. Yep.
I'm curious, given the fast-paced infill and redevelopment of the CD, what, if any, kind of right now can we act on to try and redirect some of the development, maybe in a more positive way?
Yeah, well, I think getting involved with the activities that are going on and being aware of the issues that are in the community. I think one of the most urgent issues is the new youth jail that's being opened up in the Central District. I think there's $200 million being put in that project, and it just seems to me that investing that money in things like Hack the CD or Umoja Peace Center or Africa Town and other endeavors and investments in Africa Town would be more beneficial than creating a future where you can house more African Americans and communities of color. So that's one thing, is just being aware of the issues that are going on right now, and really need every one of your voice. And we need people to shake up the status quo and to not be complacent.
Is there a legislator who's really championing that? Like, who needs to hear from us right now?
I think the city council, all of the city council members are accessible. The city council meetings are open to the public. And then there's...
I would suggest particularly Bruce Harrell and Councilman Clark.
Yep. Any other questions?
To be more specific, that's a King County issue, so it would be the King County Council that just recently voted on passage.
Yes, thank you.
So, don't forget that level of support. But I really like the idea of empathy and its ability to change hearts and minds so that people see it in their own best interest to change. What kinds of other ways can we use that model to make a difference?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I believe it's important for people to see themselves as empowered to make change, and really to understand as well the pain that they have themselves. So I think that's the key to empathy, is not just sympathy and feeling sorry for another person, but realizing your own pain and suffering, because we all have pain and suffering. And once you identify that in yourself, then you're able to see it in someone else. So I think it's really simple, not simple, but it's something that starts within ourselves, and that's what can make empathy work. Without that, it doesn't work. So hopefully that answers the question.
Kind of a tactical question that's sort of tangential. So I'm white, and my daughter is mixed, and I went to Garfield High School. But I found we're pretty segregated as a community. I work at Microsoft. I'm around mostly white people. My daughter's around mostly white people. Are there websites that I can go to or something to find events happening in the city that that are family friendly, hip hop, any of these things that you use that you?
Yeah.
Families of color. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other ones that you guys have? There's another one. Other question? Yeah.
Families of Color is a website?
Yeah, if you go to, it's FOCS, and it's started by Amy Pog. It's wonderful. If I had a kid, I'd bring my kid there. It's center that they built out, and you have a garden in the back, and it's families of color.
Thank you. Yeah, the Human City Collaboratory. Pretty awesome. I think I saw a hand over here. Right here.
Yeah, I wrote, if I woke up 100 years later, what I wanted to see. I thought I wanted to see all my friends and how they're doing, but now I want to see a world which is developed through empathy instead of through greed. If a world which is developed through empathy would be, it serves everybody's interest, it wouldn't put me against you, my child against you. So that's what I would like to see.
Thank you. Any other points of discussion around that?
I don't know if this is a question, it's probably more of a comment. Your presentation reminded me a lot of a TEDx presentation I saw back in Pittsburgh from a man named Ian Rosenberger, who works for a company called Thread, which makes recycles materials in America and makes like clothing materials for Haiti. And he does a lot of work out in Haiti as well. And he's a 6'5" white guy. He was on Survivor. But his big thing is that he conceptualized how to address and help things like poverty in a way that I think goes beyond issues of race. Two definitions. One is poverty is not a state of lack of wealth, it's a state of lack of dignity. And I think that's very clear in a lot of the images that you show, is that there's a depriving of dignity happening throughout the world that we're just not addressing straight on. The other is, a lot of the times it's not about having material, but having access to these things in the rest of the world. And I think you showed that as well. So I see a lot of connections in terms of the kind of project you're doing, and just the awareness that needs to happen to make, I think, much more substantial change in the world.
Thank you. And just on that point, race is a social construct, and ethno-racial divisions are created to diminish dignity. So that's kind of where that comes from. If you look at the history of what a white person is or what a black person is, that's why it was created. Does anybody have any other thoughts about what happens when they wake up 100 years from now?
I want to eat pizza, but that's definitely changed.
There's no zombies, everything's fine.
Yes.
I'm kind of a sci-fi nerd, and I feel like there was a time when I would approach that question, and society would approach that question with a very technologically advanced kind of Minority Report view, where everything's all crazy user interfaces and maybe androids walking around. And I feel like some of the more recent near future sci-fi, like Looper, shows a much, and maybe what's the other one, Interstellar, shows kind of a more realistic screw up of climate and progress of oh no, this world is going to be a horrible place, not a technologically advanced place. It's going to become something where the dignity that we're currently depriving a huge portion of the world of is going to spread to a global phenomenon, and we're really going to be all much more marginalized than what we kind of experience now. And I think it's cool to see that awareness shifting. So that's what you made me think of, is I think bit by bit, even our fictional culture is kind of going, wait a minute, this is going to suck.
Yeah, there's a way of thinking called transmodernism that really addresses just the urgent need for ecological and sustainable thinking compared to the kind of capitalist ways that we've been thinking and messing up our world.
Yeah, the 100 years is a little far from me. I'm concerned about the next 10 years and how things could be. And in your mind, in the next 10 years, what do you think the condition of black people in Seattle, and in particular?
Well, whenever I think about these timelines, I try to think about it in context of bigger history of not just Seattle, America, the world, but we look at emancipation that happened 1850, and Ta-Nehisi Coates really speaks to this point very well. There's been, after emancipation, years of terrorization through Jim Crow, and then after that, segregation and redlining, and we look at where we are now, we're still seeing the effects of that, and we're still dealing with the effects of that. I think we're on track where one would, if an alien came to Earth and looked at where black people would be given all those conditions, we're about where you'd expect. With that being said, I think there's opportunity to continue to address the issues that we've been fighting and addressing for the past, century. The next 10 years, given that context, again, I think with the barriers of entry to access to tools and materials and the connected world that is seeming to be even more connected as we speak, I think the power of empathy will help us to not only connect with ourselves, but connect with others around the world through, the African diaspora, but also those outside of the African diaspora to really connect as one world. So it sounds like, we are the world, we are the children type of thing, but technically speaking, I think that's really something that's an advantage to us in this day and age that we're living in, and we're starting to see those effects right now.
How do you think you can teach empathy? Because I know people see things, you see it on the news. In that moment, it's like, oh my God, that's what I want to help, and then you forget. And you go about living your own life, and you forget about everything else that everyone else is dealing with. How do you keep it in someone's face so that they remember to help and to feel?
Yeah, well, I really believe that it's not about teaching empathy, it's about remembering, because we're all born with empathy, soft-wired in our brains through these mirror neurons. And you saw my students, they really got it. They understood that, I really have to connect with someone on a real level. So with that being said, I do think really continuing to wake up complacency in the status quo and the things that are going on now, the protests and stuff happening in Mexico, the stuff happening here, all over the world, atrocities are happening, and just continuing to think of that, think about those things, and not just think about them, but really keep them on the forefront of our brain.
How can you use digital platforms to better invoke that empathy, particularly in the Seattle area?
Good question. Storytelling. I think storytelling is a powerful tool that is not new. Especially African countries have passed down oral traditions through storytelling and culture and traditions and ways of living. So I really think tapping into our natural and intrinsic ability to tell stories really helps connect with people, connect people. So taking that to the digital form, we see companies like Coca-Cola who've turned into a storytelling company. They don't just sell pop anymore. I say pop from Detroit. They really emphasize stories. So that's what you see on their cans. You see people's names. So they're really trying to connect with people, and I think we can infuse that in our products, software, and other products, hardware that we make. One more question. Saw Thomas up there, so I can hear.
It's not really a question. I just want to say thank you. Like, you, inspirational, man. Just the work that you're doing is very powerful. I'm inspired by it myself. I want to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.